Military sexual trauma is an experience, not a diagnosis or a condition, and people react in a variety of ways that has a direct impact on the relationships we have with friends, extended family, intimate partners, and children. MST does not discriminate. People of all genders, ages, sexual orientations, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and branches of service have experienced this trauma. I'm Ashley Rabolja, and I'm a survivor of military sexual trauma. Because this is such a deeply personal issue to me, I've returned to host this special American Legion Tango Alpha Lima podcast series. As the American Legion shines a light on veteran suicide, we would be remiss if we did not discuss military sexual trauma, which we know is a pervasive problem with lasting effects on the mental health of survivors' family and community. In this series, be aware, we will be discussing topics that are sensitive and potentially triggering. So take a pause and take a break as needed. Join me as we explore the ramifications of MST, share the stories of resilience, and identify resources and tools for those in need of assistance. Together, we will celebrate triumph and tragedy. Today, as we continue our series, we are going to learn more about how those who have experienced military sexual trauma can get help at VA. Lisa Shoemaker is a military sexual trauma coordinator for the Bay Pines VA healthcare system. Also joined by Susan Irons, whom is a county veteran service officer in Lincoln County, South Dakota. So she's representing. And then, ladies, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this and having the opportunity to talk about this really, really important topic that's near and dear to me.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much. I'm just so appreciative to be here and letting veterans and former service members know and become aware of the services that we have available to them. So thank you so much.
Okay, so let's kick it off. So Lisa, I'm gonna ask you first. As a military sexual trauma coordinator for Bay Pines at VA healthcare system, how does the reporting process work for you? How do veterans find you? Tell us a little bit more about your position and what veterans should know.
Well, that's actually a pretty huge.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm firing them off. I'm on fire this morning. I'm like, boom, boom. I pretty much I should be a certified firefighter at this point in my life. So,
well, I will do my best to catch all of those. So, okay. So in the healthcare system, my primary role is really to assist veterans in getting connected and getting into the healthcare system, and hopefully kind of demystify like what that is, what that's about and what that entails, because I think a lot of people think it's a much more difficult in some ways than it is. So I'm here, and we also have the special treatment authorities for veterans who may not be eligible to enroll for VHA healthcare. So that's a whole other component, and that's really where I spend probably a majority of my time, is working with former service members who might not be eligible to enroll in VHA care. So if a veteran's able to enroll, that's like where they've served the 2 years active duty, they have an honorable or general under honorable discharge, and they serve during certain time frames, they can come into to a VA, they can enroll. Once they get assigned a primary care provider, they get it connected with mental health services if that's what's needed. At their first appointments with primary care, every veteran, we have a universal MST screen. So every time a veteran is enrolled and they come to their first appointment, they're asked if they've had the experience of military sexual trauma while they were, serving their country, which is, covers, a physical assault of a sexual nature or threatening sexual harassment. So every veteran is asked that, and then we can connect them with mental health services attached to the primary care team, and then figure out where, if they want to be seen for more mental health services, they certainly can. And then the care that is considered MST related is available to them. So that's kind of an easy way in for veterans to access care related to that experience of MST, and how they kind of make it through to different programs, maybe substance abuse, maybe mental health clinic, maybe a trauma clinic. For former service members who are ineligible to enroll in VHA care, that takes a little bit more work, and that's really where I spend a good amount of my time, because they might be ineligible to enroll for primary care and other healthcare benefits, but they're eligible to receive care related to MST. So they would be eligible to receive like mental health care. They'd be eligible to receive physical care that for conditions that could be related to military sexual trauma. And the special treatment authority for those veterans is really pretty expansive. So it's 1 day of active military. It doesn't, they do not have to be in for the 2 years. The discharge is, other than honorable, even in some condition, in some situations, it might even be some dishonorable discharges if it's an administrative, not a criminal discharge. So we can, I can help get those veterans into a VA and get them seen for those conditions, but only for those conditions that can be considered related to MST, but it doesn't have to be directly related to that sexual trauma experience. It could be, conditions that are considered related due to psychological stressors, maybe like somebody who develops GERD or chronic migraines or fibromyalgia. We could consider those conditions as related to MST and get them seen without, just based on their word, like they don't have to come in service connected already to receive care for that. So seems like an easy question, but it's actually a really, that's an expansive piece of my role in the healthcare system, is ensuring that those veterans, all veterans, get treatment for MST related conditions at all of our facilities. It's not just at the parent facilities. In my healthcare system, we have 10 facilities. So it's making sure that veterans have access to that care in every facility that we have.
That's incredibly insightful. I don't think a lot of, no, I'm serious. Like it's so insightful, because I don't think veterans, nor do just military families in general, understand that there are two pathways. And you've explained them quite beautifully, right? Like you either have it through your service connect disability or active duty, whatever, right? And then for folks that have experienced military sexual trauma, anything that is related to, so mental health treatment, you said, other conditions that may have, come right from that. But the VA is here to support, and there are pathways to do so. And it sounds like you are one busy woman.
I can be, yes. But it's important, because a lot of these former service members, they have no idea that they're eligible to come to a VA to receive these services. So
Absolutely.
Important.
Very, very important. And like I said, it's very insightful, and just trying to keep, track of all of that. And then of course, informing and educating veterans on that, that's its own task, right? So we'll swing over to Susan. Now, Susan, you are a county veteran service officer. You're up in the Dakota, the South Dakota, though. We'll be very clear. I got some friends in the Dakotas, and they make that distinction, especially some of my Legion friends are like, no, I'm from this Dakota. And I'm like, but you're both Dakotas. Aren't you fam? You're always my fam, right? Okay. 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 All right. So I'll step back from that one. But Susan, so being a county veteran service officer, can you explain a little bit more of your role and the veterans that kind of come into your door, and how that's related to, VA or just folks within the community?
That's also a big question.
Okay.
Okay.
We're doing big things here today, ladies. Big things.
Yep, big things. So when a veteran comes into my office, generally they don't come in and just say, I'm a victim of military sexual trauma. That takes, some questioning and conversation. And so once we get to that point, my first question that I will ask the veteran is, do you feel safe right now? Do you feel, are you in crisis? And, how can I help you best? And so, from that question, then that determines where I'm going to go with my course of action. The first thing that I want to ask them, though, is I always ask, have you been to the VA? Have you talked to anybody at the VA? Most often than not, it's no. And so then we talk about talking to our military MST coordinator at the Sioux Falls VA is where my VA is. And you know, and I always ask, you know, I can help, you know, here's a number, but we can call together today while we're in my office and then start that process. And so that's usually the first thing that I will do if they have not been to the VA at all. And then like Lisa said, you know, most often, you know, they aren't enrolled in VA healthcare. So we talk about the registration process, and I help them with that paperwork, because that's, you know, filling out a form, and sometimes filling out forms is a lot. And so I like to help with that as well. And so once we had that contact with the MST coordinator, then, you know, that part of that the coordinator takes over from there, and I make sure that, you know, that's that, and I follow up with the veteran after that to make sure everything's going smoothly there. Another option too is, have they gone to the vet center? And, you know, the vet center is another resource that is available to MST victims. And so we talk about that. And again, you know, I offer to help make that phone call, because that's a lot of times that is just the most difficult thing for people to do. And so those are the two care options that we talk about. And then I bring up, you know, we start talking about service connection. And that is, that's a big process and is very, very overwhelming. And so we try to take that in little steps. You know, initially we'll say, hey, let's file an intent to file. Let's just, you know, let the VA know we're going to be working on something. They don't even know what we're working on, but we're going to start working on your claim, because, you know, I can see that this is affecting you, and this is, you know, this is because of what happened to you in the military. So I explain how service connection works. And then we also talk about the process, which is very lengthy. I'm assuming we're going to talk more about that later. But, you know, we kind of go through that, and then we you know, talk about what service connection means and the benefits that would offer you actually getting enrolled in VA healthcare once the veteran is service connected, and then getting, you know, care for the rest of their life at VA after that. So for everything. So that's that is the initial, you know, someone walks into my office and we start that conversation and go down that path. That's how I would handle that.
Absolutely. And Susan, so to follow up, so the vet center, could you discuss what that is and maybe some of the criteria to go to the vet center?
Yeah, so the vet center is under the umbrella of the VA, but it is not located at a VA hospital campus.
Okay.
It is a, you know, traditionally, you know, we think of mental health care as being in the hospital, and it's a little part of the hospital, but you have to go to the big place to get mental health care. What a vet center is it is for certain veterans, veterans that are victims of MST, but also, you know, combat veterans, and there are a few other criteria. You just need to walk in with a DD-214. They don't look at discharge, character of discharge. They will, if you're a veteran and you meet the criteria that they have, they will see you. And what at the vet center is they offer counseling for the veteran. There is also couples counseling, financial counseling, things like that, but it is in more of a residential setting and less clinical. And so a lot more veterans will feel more comfortable going to a vet center versus the VA hospital initially. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm sure I missed some things, but
it's nice to have options. Oh, go ahead.
Could I jump in on and just mention one thing about vet centers? Is even though they're a part of the VA, we're not connected through like our electronic medical records. So in the VA, we can't see, you know, care that someone is getting in the vet center, but that's also applicable for the Department of Defense. So active duty service members who are experiencing sexual trauma or just experienced sexual trauma pursuant to Section 402 are able to go to the vet center to receive care without needing a line of duty, without needing, the TRICARE referral. They can be seen at the vet center. It's completely confidential because there are no electronic health records attached to them. So the DoD cannot see that a service member is being seen for MST, because that could risk, you know, security clearances and other situations like that, if somebody does not want their chain of command to know that they had that experience or are being seen for that.
I did not know that. I mean, I always knew that there was like a disconnect between certain systems, but that's so fascinating. You'd think like this triangle of like triage, right, would all be communicating, but you know what? Progress. We're aiming for it. We want that, right? But it's nice to know that there is that degree of separation though for folks in those particular situations, because it's not easy. I'm somebody who unfortunately underwent an experience with military sexual trauma. And, you know, I even think about my own experiences. I remember trying to report and everyone just kind of like giggled at me and I was like, what? This is wild. This is real, right? Um, that's so fascinating. I am learning things today. Huh.
And it's so important that it has that anonymity to it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, I think
for sure.
I agree. And I think that, and that's why the Vet Center was created. It was, I think it was created by Vietnam veterans who didn't feel like they were a part of the VA system and weren't being listened to. And so that was how it was created. And it is, a lot of veterans really are appreciative that they have that option.
Absolutely.
So much we're like a blooming onion right now. We're peeling back the layers of all of these different resources. I kind of want to dive just a bit into claims. I think that in itself is the blooming onion, right? I think that there's so many layers to getting started for that. And you know, Lisa, I know you've probably had to maybe talk people through that process as well. So I would love to kind of hear both of your perspectives on the claims process and how folks can go about getting started on filing their military sexual trauma related claims, or any claim. Let's just go any claim, right? But in this particular case, whatever is applicable.
So I guess I'll start, since I specialize in claims and filing them. So when a veteran comes in and says that's what he or she wants to do is file a claim for MST, the VA, of course, has very specific criteria on what is needed to do that claim. So we talk about, getting them mental health care is the priority. But I also explain it's also important for your claim that you have something to show that you have, there is a residual effect from the trauma that you experienced. And ideally we like to get a diagnosis, a PTSD diagnosis or depression or, something like that, or just even, showing that you are reaching out for help because you have a disability. If you don't have a disability, then you shouldn't be filing a claim, so it's important to show that there is a disability and you have a diagnosis. If you don't get the diagnosis, then what I do to work with a veteran is okay, tell me how this has affected you throughout your life. And we start, from the time the trauma happened, and we go to today, and how has that affected you? What were some of the, what are, in the VA world, they call them markers. And so after the trauma happened, then how did you respond to that? How did you react? Did that affect your military performance? Did that affect your relationships? Did you turn to substances? And then how have you been, abusing substances? How has that affected you? And so we talk about that, and then and that's another piece of that. And then, of course, because it's the VA and there's forms, there is a form that absolutely has to go along with a claim for, residuals of military sexual trauma, and that is the 21-0781 alpha. And if you were filing a claim for PTSD, there's a 781, but the alpha is for assault. And so within that form, that's where the veteran can identify where they served, what unit they were in, and give as much detail as they can about the trauma. But if that form is not accompanied with the claim, the VA will develop for it and send the veteran a letter, and it just really delays the claim. So I have a checklist of everything that we need to have to, submit that claim, but that specific form is absolutely necessary. So there's a lot more. I don't know how detailed you want me to go initially on this, but that is, if I were to say one thing, that, getting the details surrounding the incident and talking about how it affects you and having a diagnosis are key to having, at least starting the claims process and hopefully having a successful claim.
Yeah, the whole picture is incredibly important. And I didn't realize that there were like two separate forms. So I think that's important for veterans to know. So I mean, Susan, as long as we're hitting like the big, like check marks of like, hey, this is what needs to happen in this sequence of order, I think we're going to do everybody a service here, because
Mhm.
it could be complicated. It could be overwhelming. It's not something people want to always talk about, right?
Absolutely.
Or something we just kind of like bury down very deeply and detach from and dissociate from. And if we can have this conversation here, it could help a lot of people, right? Like, we don't know how many people we could impact today, right? With the conversations. So just to go over, so what were the two forms one more time? So one's related to assault with the alpha, and then the other was it PTS?
It is just the standard PTSD
Standard.
form. Yep, and that's the 21-0781, and that would be combat related. Also, an accident, things of that nature.
Understood. So I'll switch it over to Lisa. We talked a little bit about VA markers, right? And like, can we elaborate a little bit more on the markers, or are they related to some of the things that like Susan kind of laid out regarding the forms? Are they more founded in like, what is it, DSM like type criteria, or how does that work?
Yeah, so some of what Susan's talking about is through the VBA, the Veterans Benefits
Mhm.
Administration. So the
Okay.
Veterans Benefits Administration is completely separate. Well, so the VA is, we have three administrations, right? We have the Veterans Healthcare Administration, which is me, right? And the hospitals and medical care. We have the Veterans Benefits Administration, which is benefits and GI loans, and and then we also have the National Cemetery Administration, which is the cemetery. And so we all connect about as much as I do with the cemetery as I do with the VBA. So, so we're very distinct, separate entities under this one big umbrella. So what the VBA looks for when they're, determining the status of a claim is definitely different than what the VHA. For VHA care, veteran just needs to walk in and say, I've had this experience. And we go, we believe you, let's get you healthcare, right? Let's get you care, mental health care. You don't need to prove diddly to us. We believe you. We're going to help you. VBA, very different, very different kind of criteria. So
Rudimentary.
yeah, so like
Paperwork.
a lot of paperwork. So when they're looking at markers, they're looking at like changes in behavior during duty time. So like, did your performance suddenly dip? Did your performance get better? Did did you go AWOL? Did you suddenly start substance use? Those are things that on a treatment setting, we can help veterans kind of pinpoint and recognize themselves, because it's, veterans don't necessarily see how it changed their lives in that moment, because usually for about a good 6 months to a year, it's kind of this crisis mode, um after having such a traumatic experience. So sometimes veterans don't really even recognize the changes that took place, and that's where treatment can come in. One of the things I definitely, if I can shout this as loud as I can, is when someone starts the claim process, is I really encourage, like if every VSO would encourage that veteran to get engaged in treatment first, before actually writing their first, Nexus event claim, and before going down that path. Because in my history, I've been doing this since 2005, and in the program here in 2007 as the MST coordinator. Right in the beginning of my start, working with this population, is I had a veteran who was so distraught that she filed a claim and it got rejected, and she brought in her Nexus letter, which is that letter that says, I experienced a sexual trauma, and right, and kind of the history of it, and their experience of it. And she had written like a 5-page Nexus, and it started with, how much she enjoyed the military, and but it was hard, it was difficult. And then she had one sentence that said, and then it happened. And then she talked about, months afterwards. And, it's like it was so difficult for her to face that trauma memory that she couldn't even write in the claim
Mm.
what happened, or she just like literally wrote, and then it happened. And that was her nexus. And it had she been in therapy first, we might have been able to do some work where she could have been talking about that and making those connections and being able to actually kind of create a better claim. And she eventually did. And she had the support she needed at that point to move forward and get service connected. But having that ability to have a therapist who can kind of walk with you through that, because it is a very trying experience. And then that's the other point is MST is an event, it's an experience that happened, but that's not what people get service connected for. They get service connected for the condition that is secondary to that experience. So I think that's important, is recognizing that you have to go beyond just advocating for what the experience was, but also how the set of symptoms that have developed as a result of that experience. And then that's what the claim, the service connection, is, gets applied for.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's 3 parts to the actual claim. So you mentioned one, the nexus statement, right? That's considered the personal, like, this is how it's impacted me. Is that correct? And then I want to say it's the military service, right? So it's related to military service, an incident of time in service. And then I believe the third one's the actual medical diagnosis. And is that something that's determined by VHA eventually, or that's like, how does that work? Because I think those 3 things confuse veterans. And Susan, you might be able to add on to that. But like, when you get your claim letter, there has to be those 3 criteria met. And sometimes folks are missing, say, the nexus statement, like you stated, right? They say it happened, right? And that's, of course, honestly, it's deeply relatable for me. I remember how hard that was, right? Because like I was sitting in front of the MST coordinator and I was like, here's all of the stuffs and people's letters and about what had happened. And here's my hot take of it. And that was challenging. That is a hard thing to do. So I could see why a veteran would be incredibly frustrated, or maybe want to shut down and be like, no, I don't want to pursue this. And I think both of you have had experiences where you've had to tell veterans, like, we can work on this. This is workable. How do you like move forward and have those kind of conversations with veterans and discussing the 3 things that need to kind of all be aligned?
So that's why when someone comes to my office and they want to do something about it, we, again, make sure that they're not in crisis, or let's get them help right away. But the big piece is, okay, they're ready to file a claim. So I just say, let's file an intent to file. That gives us a whole year to do those things that Lisa talked about, and getting treatment and getting an understanding of the trauma, so that we can now talk about what happened, because the VA has to know that. And that's part of that on that 21-0781 alpha. You have to be able to explain what happened. That's your nexus statement. And your that there's on that form is a place to write what happened. And then you also can you talk to other people that may have been witnesses or saw a change in your behavior, or know how it's affecting you today, and gather evidence that way. And I always tell them, I said, this is like we're building a case, and it's we need to give the VA as much information as we can, so that they can't say no. And if they need to know, and this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, but that's what I'm here for. And if I, instead of just say, here's the form, go home and do this, I will say, this is the form, look it over. And when you're ready, come back to my office, and then you can tell me and I can type it for you. You don't have to do that if you don't want, if you don't want to do it yourself. And so, it's just, and again, I say, we have a whole year to do this, and let's, from today's date, it'll come, the claim will come back to that. But we want to do this right the first time, so that we don't have to keep coming back and revisiting this. And so, and then, again, getting the treatment, from Lisa's perspective, if we can get the treatment, then we can get diagnoses for, the mental health condition, but possibly other, health conditions related to that. And then when we're ready to file the claim, all that evidence is there along with the statement and, other statements or other evidence, and then we can submit the claim and hopefully be successful with the VA on that.
Let's see. At least you may know this. So does the VA or VHA have particularly a, like if a veteran comes into you and they're like, hey, like, I want to work with MST coordinator, but say they want to go back and even work for like a Legion, a VFW, or a county service officer. Does the VA have a tool, like a locator tool or any sort like that?
Yeah, let's see. I think we do, don't we? I think I know on the va.gov website there's a locations. And I think there is where you can somewhere in the va.gov website where you can type in veteran service organizations and it will give you a list of ones that have been accredited.
Yes.
Yeah, and kind of like vetted through the VA. So absolutely, I know I sent a lot of people, like the Florida Department of Veteran Affairs, and actually a lot of VAs, like the main medical centers, have the veteran service organizations actually on campus. We have a number of them on our campus.
Yes, that's true. And that's where a lot of them get referred to, and they might walk across the street from the hospital into those offices and say, they told me to come see you.
I love that. They're like, you're in the right place. Hi.
Mhm.
extend hand for handshake. I think it's important because I think that, of course, there's been conversations where people are like, oh, if you pay me X money, I'll help you with your claim. Like, no, like I tell veterans all the time, no, like that's no, don't do that. There are accredited folks that partner with military service organizations, veteran service organizations. The VA kind of establishes who knows what they're doing. So there are many pathways for you to go to someone you trust and have this hard conversation. So what I'd like to know is, Lisa, for example, what is a little bit deeper dive of, like, once you have people like in your office and you're going through items, is there any like advice or like pearls of wisdom you would bestow upon folks who are super nervous about this and they don't know what to expect? Like, I guess like more of the emotional and like practical approach of how you would go about working with folks who are very hesitant.
Hesitant for filing a claim or accessing treatment?
I would say, both. I think they go hand in hand. I mean, honestly, I know I was someone who was hesitant to file a claim and I was hesitant to report. I didn't know what the repercussions or, any reprisal that would come from that. Right. So, it's hard. People will do it when they're ready, I suppose. Right. But, I don't know. I don't know.
And and that's, when you're saying people when they're ready, by and large, I would say that the average age for when people reach out to me and for the first time disclose that they've experienced MST and are really at the point where they've decided they need to face it are well into their 50s. I mean, most people are coming forward 30 years after the trauma had occurred, and then they're finally starting to see, boy, this is still impacting me today. I didn't know that this was it. And I want help now. So it is, I mean, it's so profound. It's such a profound trauma that, individuals just do everything that they can to stuff it and push it away and try to, make it something different than what it was. And, hold that, one of the, I think, unfortunate for the veteran, one of the methods is they kind of try to hold responsibility. Like, if I hadn't had done something, this wouldn't have happened to me. So it's my fault. So I just need to suck it up and carry on. And really, I think one of the most important things I can do is to sit with that veteran and work through that. Absolutely not, that you had no responsibility in this. And I think kind of facing that perspective allows the veterans to then start actually feeling like they can make a claim and deserve compensation, because they're finally getting past that mindset of it was my fault, to no, this shouldn't have happened to me. And I think by and large the VA is really supportive that it should not have happened. This should not happen to our soldiers who and our service members that enlisted and said, I'm here to stand for our country. This is things that should not happen. So it's definitely difficult for service members to come in and start this process. As far as engaging in treatment, many service members think, well, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. I want it to go away. And if I start treatment, then it's just going to bring it all up. And, of course, my thought is, when isn't it there? I mean, it's always there. So talking about it more is going to help you work through it and start to change the way that your mind relates to the information. So treatment, while hard, eventually affords, relief. And, one thing at VAs, we've gotten really good at treating military sexual trauma. I mean, it happens to so many service members. I mean, the latest numbers are 1 in 3 female veterans and 1 in 50 male veterans have disclosed to a VA provider. I mean, these are veterans who've actually come forward and said, this has happened to me. So those numbers are just astronomical. And so at VA, I mean, we've gotten really good at treating it. I think we're the best healthcare system. We're the best, mental health in the country for working with adult survivors of sexual trauma. So we can, and we've developed manualized treatments that are really amazingly helpful, really tough, but amazingly helpful in helping individuals reclaim their lives. And often I will encourage veterans to start those treatments and then use some of the work that they did in those treatments to support the claim. Because in some of them, they're actually writing out kind of their traumas and the impact that the trauma has had. And I say, submit this. This here is going to be perfect for your service connection, because you deserve to be service. You deserve to go through that service connection process. But that's trying in itself.
Right.
Getting those denials is trying. Getting approved. I will often have a lot of veterans come forward and say, I've been service connected for this. Now I have to recognize that, yes, this happened to me. And every month I get this, financial compensation, and I have to recognize that this happened to me. And, some veterans call it blood money. And, and then it's kind of working with, it's not blood money. I mean, this shouldn't have happened to you. You deserve this compensation for how this has impacted your life. So there's a lot of work. I mean, both, on kind of every front of this service connection claim.
I resonate with that. I absolutely resonate with that. And I think that there are a lot of people out there listening and viewing today who maybe don't want to, bring that memory up, or have gone through, are currently going through this process, or say they have received a denial letter. Like, I always want to encourage people, like appeal, right? You can appeal that, like continue to work on yourself and advocate for yourself. It's important, your health and your wellness is, and you're absolutely right. Folks sometimes misinterpret that compensation, right? Or they're like, oh, well, there's other veterans out there who need it more than I do. I've heard that time and time again. It doesn't matter the age of the veteran. I hear that frequently. And I know that the VA has done a great deal in regards to promotion of mental health and services, and there are resources. And Lisa, could you talk a little bit to what the VHA has as far as resources, any apps, things that are resources for the community? I guess anything that the veteran should know exists within both the treatment and just resources on website or wherever.
So here's a resource that I'm just so passionate about. Is you mentioned an app, and the VA has developed an app It's a smartphone app. You can go into, the Google or, like the Android stores or the, iPhone stores and download it. It's called Beyond MST. So it's an app. It's available to anybody. You don't have to be a veteran to download it. It's available to anybody, but it really talks to education about the experience of military sexual trauma, how to practice grounding skills, and how to better cope, and how to engage in treatment. It lists the MST coordinators in every facility. It lists VBA MST outreach coordinators in every VBA region. So it has just a lot of information. It helps normalizing, and it has a coach to it, so you can every day you can check in and recognize triggers and how to approach triggers, and it talks about different treatment options. Like a lot of our I think just about every VA has providers who are trained and skilled in prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy. Those are our PTSD treatments for secondary to someone's experience of MST. They're very helpful. So it's just a wealth of information. But then and then in house, we use the evidence-based therapies to assist veterans as well.
That's very helpful. I have I know I personally I have like a breathing app. I didn't realize how anxious I could be. This is for anybody out there who's ever had anxiety for about anything, whether it's service related or not. Your breath is so important. And I know that there are some really there's some really neat apps that the VA provides. I think one of them is there is a breathing tool, one other, I'm pretty sure.
We have mindfulness coach.
Yeah. I love those things too, because I'm also the type of person who I'll set reminders on my phone, because I'm someone who will get stuck upstairs in my brain, like racing around. What do I need to do next? But at 10 a.m., I get an alarm and it says, you're going to have a beautiful day because you're gorgeous, right? Or like 1 o'clock, like, don't forget to eat, because I'm also that person. So even noticeably putting those reminders into your life, or having an app or something that reminds you, that brings you back down to center, is really important. And I think we're so busy racing around or scrolling through social media that we have to, when we're forced to slow down, that's when things we start to feel. It's just, again, it's one of those important conversations to have with all of the resources out there. But doing that work for yourself is tough. It's going to be challenging. So Susan, I'll ask a similar in-kind question, right? What kind of resources are tend to be your favorites that you share with veterans that they should know about, or wherever you want to take that question? Because we're doing lots of big things here today. So
we really are. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit and talk about treatment, because resources, that is, please go see somebody, talk to somebody that can help you with this and what happened to you, and help you work through that so that you can feel better. And this is a disclaimer here. This is not the best analogy. Pretty wise, it's pretty, I'm an Army, veteran. So we tell it like it is. So I always say to, this is, and I don't want to go to treatment. I don't want to do, and say, you know what, have you ever had the stomach flu? Well, everybody's had the stomach flu. And that things are heading south and you just don't feel good. And it's like, I'm gonna get sick, but you fight it, and you just are miserable. And this is how you're feeling about treatment right now. But when you have the stomach flu and you get sick, you feel better. So you're going to go to treatment, you're going to talk about what happened to you, and you're going to get it out there, and you can flush it, and it's out. Once it's out, it's not as scary. And you can say, okay, I got it out. It's out there. I'm flushing it. And sometimes you have to do that a few times, and that's okay, but you will feel better. And I promise you, going to treatment will do that. So I always say, this is gross, but we're going to talk about it and get, so you want to feel better, right? So this is what you need to do. And the other thing, when you touched on, well, why should I file a claim? Other people need it more than I do, or I don't want to be a bother, or I've been dealing with this for so long. What difference would it make if I do this now? And I tell people, I say, it's your responsibility to file a claim. You've earned these benefits. You raised your right hand. You did what you were told to do, where you were supposed to be doing it. And the government said, we'll take care of you after your time in service. And this is the only way. Filing a claim using VA healthcare is the only way our government knows the impact of your military service. And why that is important is because I always tell them, you don't want this to happen to future generations of soldiers and sailors and airmen. You don't want this to happen to anybody else. So we have to let the government know. And this is the only way that we can do this. And I always say selfishly, I have 3 children currently serving right now. And I want them to be safe. I want them to have the best resources available to them. And so this is why we're doing this. Do this for me and my kids. And so, but that's kind of, I think, when you can look at it like that, then it's like, okay, it's okay for me to file a claim. It's okay for me to go and get treatment. I want to feel better. I deserve it. My family deserves a healthier me. So, okay, I'm going to do that. And then that's where, I reach out with the MST coordinator, and we're talking, and I'm like I said from the beginning, my MST veterans are very special to me, and I make sure that they are doing okay throughout the process. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I felt it was important to say that.
If there ever was a sign, Susan has it in neon. She's like ready. She's ready to, I love it. And also I noticed that you were a single corps officer and a West Point grad. So much signs and signals going all the right directions. And I appreciate you because I'm also an Army gal. Anyway, maybe give selfless plug for my Army folks. But it's important. And one of the things that I really heard there was their why, right? Like if it's important to you, that's enough. If it's important that you be better for your spouse, for your children, like that is enough to say like, you know what, I'm going to handle this. And having a support system is so important. And we have, for everyone out there listening, we have 2 amazing people here, and there is a fleet, an army, and, the squadron. There are people out there nationally willing to help you at the Veterans Health Administration, at county service officers, the American Legion, at the VFW, anywhere who have these accredited claim specialists specifically to help you, right? But you're right. It's your responsibility to say, hey, you know what? How do you eat an elephant? There's an analogy, one bite at a time, So it's so important. And I'm so happy to have had both of you on here today to have this meaningful, just very important, big conversation. Maybe that's what we need in Neon. Doing big things. Super producer Holly, we're making this the big episode, and maybe we can get Tom Hanks on here. That would be really great. But selfless cultural plug there. But I want to say thank you to both of you for being here. And if you have any last, parting words, I'll roll it on over to you.
I would just say is, talk to a veteran service officer or go to your VA if this is something that you've been carrying around. If you've been carrying this in your rucksack for a really, really long time, you don't have to. It's time to take the bricks out and live your life like you need to.
Sage advice. What about you?
Yeah,
Lisa?
and it's definitely, it's never too late to reach out for help and get treatment for MST. I think a lot of veterans tell me, it happened so long ago. Why would I, what do I need treatment now for? But then just as on the flip side of that, I've had veterans in their 80s come in saying, I really want to face this before I die because I want to be able to die well. And if we can help veterans reclaim their lives before they're, at that point where they're thinking about, legacy, and still being able to reclaim their lives so that they can live and have joy and get relief, please come in. I mean, the VA, we are here to help. We are here.
Well, I appreciate your time. I thank you kindly. And for all of our listeners and viewers out there, I hope that you've listened wholeheartedly. I hope this has opened your mind and your heart, let's be honest, because it's incredibly important. And I will say, and lastly, alphas, this is the last episode of our MST series. We hope that you've learned something that can help you or someone that you care about. You can find the rest of our special series and all 4 seasons of the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you are consuming your podcasts. Subscribe to the Tango Alpha Lima on your favorite platform so you don't miss a single episode. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter and send us feedback at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Tango Alpha Lima special series. We understand that this content can be triggering. Please know that you are not alone, and if you are in crisis or in need of support, you don't have to be enrolled in VA to connect to the Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988, then press 1 for 24/7 confidential crisis support.